afternoon and welcome to the third episode of In the Trenches with Inventors, brought to you by US Inventor. Each week we'll be hearing real-life stories from inventors about how and why their patents were invalidated. I'm Natasha Ruckle, your moderator, and today we're going to look at the outline of our webcast. It's going to last approximately 60 minutes. We have an amazing lineup of panelists. Then our guests will tell their stories and participate in our debate, will the Supreme Court invalidate the PTab? But right now, I want to introduce our host, Randy Landreneau. He's an inventor with 3 patents. He's a former president and current board member of the Tampa Bay Inventors Council and president of Complete Product Development, a firm that does CAD design, prototyping, and short runs. And at US Inventor, Randy works tirelessly with inventors across America, enabling a grassroots effort to restore the rights of inventors here in the US. Randy, thank you for joining us. I wonder if you'd like to start by telling us a bit about the role of US Inventor and the goal of today's webinar.
Sure. Thank you, Natasha. If you think about it, it's hard to think of something important that wasn't invented in America. And there's a reason for that. America, from the very beginning, had patent rights for inventors that were superior. In fact, when we started, it was revolutionary what was granted to inventors, to the ownership of what they invented, through a patent, through the patent rights, the legal ownership, to be able to stop anyone from taking it, to be able to do something with it, to build wealth from it, to have a real incentive to invent and change the world. And America had that better than any country in the world. And for about 200 years, we led the world in innovation. And this has been such a key part of America, and one of the key things that has made America different than the rest of the world, because America has been very different than the rest of the world. That's why people talk about the American dream. This is a big part of it. And unfortunately, large corporations have a big incentive to try to reduce those rights, which they have done extremely effectively in recent years, so that they don't have to have disruptive competition from disruptive startups like they were when they started. Bill Gates in 1998 was interviewed and was asked, what is it that worries you the most in business? And what he said was, some guy in a garage, he didn't say guy, he said somebody in a garage inventing something I haven't thought of. And of course, that is the concern. Someone coming out with something that is the next big thing that will compete. And if they have patent rights that they can defend, they can really do something big with it. And, corporate attorneys for multinational corporations, there are corporate attorneys full-time fighting to keep the system broken as it is now, or to break it when it wasn't yet broken, which they did very effectively, which is what we're going to be talking about here. And the way US Inventor got started was in a big fight. I was fighting the American Invents Act, which we'll talk about a little bit here. We lost that battle. The bill got passed. It created the Patent Trial and Appeals Board, which we're going to talk about, that is destroying inventors. Another bill was about to be passed 2 years later. And in the fight to stop that bill, US Inventor was formed, and we stopped that bill, luckily, with a little help. But the purpose of US Inventor is to restore the rights of inventors in America. This is a key part of America that America absolutely needs to compete in the world. And it's a terrible wrong that those rights we've allowed multinational corporations to use false narratives and teams of lobbyists and lots of money to get laws passed that have made it virtually impossible to stop a big corporation from simply taking what you've invented and patented. It is so un-American. So that's what we're here for. And what you're going to hear from these panelists today is how this broken system has affected them and their patented products.
When people registered, that a lot of people hadn't heard of PTab. So could you just quickly explain what PTab is for the audience, please?
Yes, the PTab is the Patent Trial and Appeals Board. It was created by the American Invents Act, which passed in 2011. It was sold to Congress as a cheaper, faster, but fair alternative to district court. That was how it was sold. What it really became, and maybe, I don't think our congressman intended this, but I think the people behind the bill absolutely intended what occurred with it, which was that it became a killing field for patent rights. It's not a real court. Prior to this, you'd have a real court. with called an Article 3 court, where you have a jury and a lifetime appointed judge and a lot of due process. It's America. You have a patent. Someone's trying to invalidate it. You deserve some due process. What the PTab is, though, it's not a real court. It's an administrative court. There's no jury. There's a whole lot less due process. There's no lifetime appointed judge. You have a panel of 3 judges who very often are corporate attorneys. And they have the wrong viewpoint from the start. And the PTab, it actually invalidates, of the cases that have gone all the way through it, 84% of the patents have been either fully or partially invalidated. And it's very expensive. The AIPLA estimates that $400,000 to $800,000 to fight a PTab fight. And if you win one, they can come and hit you with another one, and another company can hit you with another one, and you can face multiple PTab fights. And what determines whether or not you'll face the PTab is how valuable is your patent and how many PTab attacks does it take to invalidate it. And the other thing about it too is, historically in America, inventors don't have a lot of money when they start. I mean, look, Steve Jobs didn't have a lot of money. Bill Gates didn't have a lot of money when he started. He was a college kid, or he just left college. The Google guys, they didn't have a lot of money. It always starts small with an individual or a few individuals, typically with no money, but with some great ideas. And back then, when those guys started, there was a patent system that protected them and gave them a way to succeed in a world of vested interest that would have liked to crush them. Well, now they've become the vested interest, and they've gotten the laws changed, so you can't. But the point is, back then, and historically, you would fight these cases on contingency, where you don't have to pay the attorney very much up front, but he shares in the winnings, he or she. Now with the PTab, it's very, very difficult to find an attorney who'll take a PTab case on contingency, because there's no winnings from it. You're probably going to lose the patent and never actually get to court where you could win something. So we're talking about the typical inventor that our Constitution says is supposed to have patent rights, not even being able to access justice at all in America. It is outrageous. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And these inventors here have some experience with the PTab.
Thank you, Randy. Well, our first inventor today is Mike Kittner. Mike invented the first multi-camera system to repurpose existing cameras to create high-definition 360-degree video with super high resolutions of 24,000 by 12,000 pixels. That's huge, several times bigger than typical HD, which is 1920 by 1080. Now, Mike's invention actually got into the Guinness Book of World Records for the first 360-degree video from the top of Mount Everest. Now, because Mike's invention can film 1 mile deep in the ocean, the Navy used it to film things like underwater transfers between submarines. And also, and this is a fun fact, Shark Week used Mike's invention to get some great footage. Let's have a quick look at a video.
Hello everyone, my name is Mike Kittner from 360 Heroes, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new product. This is the 360 Abyss version 4. It's a little over 2.5 years in the making, so we're really excited to finally work out all the kinks and details, and I think we've got it.
You gotta force yourself to lower your heart rate. You gotta get the fear right out of your head. And whatever you do, never panic.
Well, what you didn't see about that last piece of video was that you can actually scroll around on the screen with your mouse and go into any direction and follow the shark. It's quite intimidating and very immersive and very cool. Now, Mike's been producing and licensing his invention when GoPro actually started infringing. Mike, please tell us what happened.
It was interesting because when we did the Guinness Book of World Records, it really put us on the planet, and everybody recognized what we were doing in the world of 360. And now I personally didn't go to the top of Mount Everest, but my team and my crew did, which is the most important. And they all came back alive, which is even more important. And we had also built some other underwater camera, and that's the Abyss unit. And what they do is they actually use GoPro cameras. We can also use Yi Technology cameras, Kodak cameras, Blackmagic cameras, and actually put them inside the 360 rigs. And in the case of this Abyss rig, the second thing that really made us recognized or worldly renowned is a great white shark actually ate my $10,000 prototype. So it was an interesting email that I received to say, oh, by the way, Mike, I kind of lost your your underwater rig. And but luckily we got some pretty interesting footage on that. But what the whole thing started is, you know, I just built my products because I love to do 360 video. I love to do the cameras and stuff like that. And it was really exciting. And what was really interesting was in the middle of my case, of my patent infringement case with GoPro, I got, you know, we were told that we had an IPR PTab filed on 360 Heroes. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And basically what the IPR PTab stands for is called Inter Parties Review. And it's interesting because Randy called it a patent trials appeals board. I call it a patent tribunal arbitration board. And when I heard this, I'm thinking this must be something. It sounds like something I'm being put on the chopping block, and it's something to kill my patent. And that's exactly what it was. I had no idea, other than it was probably some other means that GoPro would do to delay my case and cost me more money. And so basically in layman's terms, or should I say hangman's terms, it's a process by which the same organization, the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, where you paid to get a valid patent, can now be invalidated. And that the direction of at the direction of the infringing company, an IPR PTab can be instituted to invalidate your hard work. I mean, they never told us that when I started to create a patent. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that the same organization that you can get a valid patent from can invalidate it because the infringing company can impose that. And what is even more amazing is that on average, it costs $450,000 to defend. And if the inventor wins, he has a 26% chance of winning. And what's even more surprising is that if the inventor wins the IPR PTab, really you get nothing other than to keep your existing patent. And what it does, and like in my case, I'm going to talk about in more detail, it delayed my patent case by a year and a half, and it could have cost me on average of $450,000. And if I lost, I get nothing. My patent is invalidated, my patent case is done, and I can't move forward. You know, I mean, even GoPro tried to strip away my acknowledgement with the Guinness Book of World Records, that I couldn't even do that. I'm like, you didn't invent this stuff, but they wanted to take it anyway in the case. It's just absolutely stunning. Now, in my case, I had the IPR PTab filed against me. However, it's called a 1-year time bar. And what that means is the infringing company, from the time they filed the first patent infringement case, this is the key point, the first patent infringement case, they only have 1 year from the time that case is filed to file an IPR PTab. However, in GoPro case, they went ahead and filed it anyway. They knew it was wrong and they filed it without taking into consideration this 1 year time bar. And thankfully, I was able to request a rehearing through the support of US Inventor and Josh Malone that made me aware of this. I had no idea that there was a 1 year time bar limit.
Let me jump in real quick, Mike. So basically, GoPro tried to get a PTab instituted after the 1 year time bar. And the PTab, if I'm not mistaken, they actually were in the process, they accepted it.
Yep.
And then was when you found out from Josh that, wait a minute, you can appeal this. And I think if you had to face that PTab at that time, as they were about to make you go through, would you have even been able to continue your business? Could it have wiped you out?
I've been done. I've been totally wiped off the planet. And what's even more interesting with this, because what I found with my particular case, I've won patent claims. I got 21 claims. I won every one of them. I won my Markman hearing definitions. I won multiple summary judgments. And they're just doing whatever they can do to delay the case. And in this case, they used it to delay it. And what's even more amazing, and I just can't believe that a company can do this, is we won the PTab, again, with the support of Josh making me aware of that, and US Inventor supporting those efforts in learning that whole process, because I had no idea that it was even there. But
hold on. One second, Mike.
Yep.
So you actually were able to not have your case instituted into the PTab, right?
Correct.
So that It wasn't actually a win, but it was like they didn't get to PTab you.
Exactly. They didn't get a chance to PTab me. But what's even more interesting is when we won that rehearing, okay, GoPro appealed it. So that added another 4 months to the case, and then GoPro never showed up for the appeal. So it was it's purely a delay tactic, to continue the case and make it harder for me, the inventor, to be able to do that.
Hey,
and what I've learned
Randy, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this is Josh, and thanks for the shout out, Mike. Just to reiterate on what Mike observed. So we at US Inventor, we help inventors. And so one of the things we do is every week we check to see who got drug into the PTab this week. And what I find is a lot of inventors, and you may hear from another one or two later today, they have no idea what this is. And it turns out their attorneys don't either. And Mike, I'm going to go ahead and pile on and tell the audience a little more about how you were mistreated, not just by the patent office, but your own attorney bailed out on your case.
Yep.
When GoPro broke the law, I caught it. I notified you and your attorney said, sorry, Mike, we're not going to help you with that. And this has happened time and time.
And I didn't have the money to defend it.
They basically abandoned you. And so US Inventor stepped in and we filed the papers for you, and you came out of the PTab, but that's, you're still in litigation. So where's it at now, in spite of us being able to help you out with a little victory there? What's next?
Well, right now, that same firm that didn't help me out there, I no longer have them as attorneys, and I have new attorneys now that are helping me. It's just been one mess after another. And really, to be honest with you, when I look at all this, And what I've learned is that, you know, it has nothing to do really with the validity of your patent. It's all about who's got the most money to destroy the inventor and drag it out so that you never get a chance to take it to trial. So it really, to be honest with you, you know, I spent over $150,000 to create my patent. Why? Why even spend that money in the first place if I'm going to be drug out and spend millions? I mean, in our case, with between the insurance companies and lawyers, we're talking over $4 million. That's absolutely flabbergasting.
And the sad thing is, so you got out of the PTab with GoPro, and since they're beyond the 1 year time bar, they can't PTab you. But you know what? Someone else can PTab you.
Yep.
And that's why, to our viewers, we really need to fix the system, which we're working very hard, and we need everybody's help in doing so.
And what's happening right now too is I have other companies that are infringing on the patent. And guess what? They're going to learn that, oh, I can file an IPR PTab, you know, and I will do whatever they can do to validate it. So it's just very frustrating. And I just never believed that when I went through the whole patent process that nobody ever told me about an IPR PTab. I had no idea. And now what I've learned, it's like a 26% chance of success. Oh my God. You know, you might as well just take a lottery ticket.
Hey, can I ask one more question before we go to our next guest?
Sure.
A short one. So we like to deal with the myths here on In the Trenches. And one of the myths, it's very common, it's very well accepted, is that the PTab is faster and less expensive than a regular court. Can you reiterate if that's your experience?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's definitely not fast. It extended my case by 1.5 years. And the cost to this, well, I don't really want to disclose that whole information, but it was well over $50,000, $60,000, I would guess, to be able to do that. And that's just a rehearing. That's not even into the case of the PTab.
Well, Mike, those sort of stories make me want to cry. I mean, if you're a small inventor, you don't have the funds to back you up. It's a terrible situation to be in. Now, I just want to give a quick introduction to Josh, who actually is inventor of Buncho balloons, and his solution to a 63-year-old problem of filling in time water balloons instantly became a #1 hit. Now, just as quickly, it was knocked off, resulting in a patent litigation that totals 6 patents, 5 patent suits, 5 PTab petition trials, 4 preliminary injunctions, and 8 appeals at federal court. And that's why Josh knows so much about the process. And we're grateful to him for joining us and sharing his information and knowledge that he picked up as he went along. Now to our second guest today. Our second guest is Stu Douglas. He invented a revolutionary new tool that replaces the traditional ratchet wrench. Now, the roller clutch doesn't actually use gears. It uses rollers, which is stronger, more efficient, and definitely much safer. Now, if you've ever used a ratchet in a really tight space, you'll know the frustration of not having enough room for those gears to engage. Well, the roller clutch solves these problems. Now, we're going to have a little video here so that we can see Stu explaining his product. Roll video.
Hey guys, I'm Reba with Roller Clutch Tools. My favorite tool is the ratchet, but not just any ratchet. This is the new NRG3, and it is definitely not your daddy's tool. This baby uses rollers rather than gears, so it works really well in those tight spots. Let's head over to the test lab.
Access for the average tool can be a real problem, especially when you're working like this in a tight spot. The handle gets hung up and stops working. That, my friend, is the definition of frustration. This is the roller wrench, and it was designed to operate in tight spots. It has 0 back throw, so when you have these type of conditions, you're always satisfied and can complete your job. This is the new legacy model. As you can tell, it has that retro look. It also comes with an extension handle such as this that can be attached for additional torque. Cool thing about all our extension handles is they're made by 3D printers. You can go online and order from a variety that we have, or in the event you have access to your own printer, you can simply download the files and print it for free.
Well, Stu licensed the roller clutch to Snap-on Tools, and his sales were rising. And then Lowe's became interested and approached Stu. Now, who wouldn't get excited about Lowe's coming to see you? Well, Stu, thanks for joining us. What happened?
Well, it became a major headache because I had no idea that Lowe's and the Cobalt brand, pretty much their MO is to identify new tool products. And if they can just run with them and do the knockoffs, that's exactly what they do. So I spent months negotiating with Lowe's and with their vendor, JS Products, to go ahead and give them, a license to manufacture. And everything looked fine. We all agreed to our terms, but at the 11th hour, when I actually looked at the license, they pulled the big switcheroo. And the guts of that license is always the royalty and the amount of the royalty and how often they're going to pay it. So suddenly the royalty amount that we had agreed upon in Charlotte was cut in half without my authorization. I'm like, oh, that's pretty tricky. So at the end of the day, I refused to sign the agreement, but it didn't stop Lowe's. They continued into full production, sold $25 million worth of them. And then I said, now what? So being here in California, which is basically the land of litigation, I assumed that infringement would be, an easy enough deal. But as it turned out, there's not a California firm that will represent an inventor for infringement. End of story. And I was shocked by that, of course. So anyway, I continued my search and we located a firm down in Texas. And as it turns out, for whatever reason, the eastern part of Texas, they specialize in infringement. So we proceeded, we filed our complaint with Lowe's. And then, as usual, we started seeing how everybody's protected with layers of insurance and indemnification. So Lowe's immediately kicked it down to their vendor, their middleman, because they have to by law indemnify the distributor. So then we had to rewrite, spend the money and the time, of course, to rewrite our lawsuit and name their supplier, their vendor. So that became another long, tedious challenge. But one thing my attorney that we use in Texas, I'll give them a shout out. It's Carpenter and Joe and Buther. They were awesome. And we were able to negotiate a very decent settlement amount. And then for some reason at the 11th hour again, Lowe's introduced, this is Lowe's, not JS Products. Lowe's introduced their own attorney who now specialized in PTab. And of course, I had never even heard, silly me, being here in California, I'd never even heard of PTab. So of course we jump on it. And right when I'm doing all my research, I get served 2 petitions and basically saying, we're going to go ahead and invalidate both of your patents, Mr. Douglas. See you later. So anyway, after a long, painful conversation with my attorneys, we said, wait, look at this. No, they didn't want to touch it. Nobody wants to touch the PTab. It's always on the wrong side of the court. The attorneys that love it are the ones that represent the infringers. So, being here in California where I'm surrounded by Apple and I'm surrounded by Google, I hate to say it, 2 of the most corrupt companies on earth, and GoPro. I was listening to Mike's story, but Nick Woodman and Paul Crandall from GoPro, they live near me. So this is how bad California is. Anyway, so we finally went back basically with our hat in our hand, and we dropped what we'd already agreed upon with JS Products, and we settled for half the price. So I thought, well, you either pay now or you pay later. So it forced us to suffer. And as I said earlier, there's nothing more heartbreaking when you go through all the time and the money to file a patent and it is granted. And suddenly this PTab shows up, which in my opinion is misrepresentation by the PTO. They should tell you right up front that there's a distinct possibility that in the event it's challenged, in a PTab, you're going to lose, and here's the sequence of event. They don't give you any of that. So that, to me, that's not fraud, but it's pretty close to it. So long story short, I hate to say that, but I think that the PTab, the IPR, is really just a symptom of what's wrong with our country. So the question is, what's the solution? I highly support US inventors and their push, to have the PTab reevaluated, in Congress. That's a long, ugly battle, in my opinion. What I did find during my process is that patent infringement is not a crime. It's just a civil matter. And that's why none of these companies, the big ones, they don't care about being sued for infringement. I think that's part of their business plan, to tell you the truth. So an easy step, I think, to protect the inventors would be to criminalize patent infringement, similar to what we have with copyright. I mean, why is copyright a criminal offense and patent infringement is not? I mean, I just don't understand that.
Yeah, Stu, we definitely have inventors who feel the exact same way you do. I have some allies who say the exact same thing. It should be criminal. Another thing that's criminal about your situation is that JS Products, the company that Lowe's gets their tools from, that was the key party in this suit until Lowe's came back around, is a Chinese company. So they're in China, they're producing tools for Lowe's, and they basically were able, that our patent office enabled this Chinese company to get a lowball deal on your invention. It's outrageous.
Yeah, and it gets worse than that. Almost every product you see at these big boxes, it's a two-step. So you have the primary distributor, whether it's Home Depot or Lowe's. Then you have their vendor, and the vendor does not manufacture anything. They just purchase all the products from China typically. And then you have your manufacturer. And if the manufacturer is intelligent, say the way Great Star is, they also have an LLC based right here in the United States. So they have the ability to control and to influence, what's going on. And that's why this has become such a problem. And two, even just watching last night on the news, where you see some of these big tech, like Twitter, stepping in, breaking the law, blocking Twitter accounts illegally, and nobody does anything about it. So that would be, and I hate to say that because here I am in California, the home of big tech. And yet eventually we need legislation for antitrust to break some of this down, because the power that Apple and Google have right now is just spooky, and it's not going to get any better. So, and then one last thing I'll mention for all the inventors to really think long and hard about, infringement happens. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So in the event you are infringed, now what? What type of a complaint are you going to file? What I learned after dealing with our group in Texas, we should have went in, rather than for infringement, we should have went in there for trade secret theft. And again, that's criminal. It makes it much easier because now the federal court has to handle it, and you're not, sitting here as an individual in a civil suit where you're liable for 100% of all the legal fees. So it's much more affordable. To me, it's much more deadly because it's easier to prove, especially if you have a signed non-disclosure. But that in the future, man, I have other people, as I said, that are infringing. So we're looking at, rather than the patent infringement suits, going forward with just trade secret theft.
Well, Stu, I think you raised some really valid points there, and definitely more discussions ahead on what you raised. But thank you for joining us, and please keep
Certainly.
that battle going. We're all behind you.
Thank you.
Oh, I could see Mike raising his hand. Dare I let him speak?
I
Quickly,
got one
Mike.
question there. This other lawsuit that you're talking about, Josh, can you chime in on this? Have you heard about this? Is this something that we should consider on some of the other things that we're talking about and moving forward?
Yeah, we do talk about strategies, and we might have to save that for another program. Let's put that on the schedule.
I just find that really, it's first I've heard of that, and that sounds like another very effective manner to protect your assets. So, thank you.
I agree. I agree. And I think we'll write it down for a topic for another seminar. So thank you, Stu. Let's introduce our next guest, Paul Hayes. Now, Paul invented a way for electric power meters, I'll repeat that again, electric power meters to be gateway routers for the internet. Because of limited funds and time, though, Paul chose to license the invention and soon found that he was being infringed by a large corporation. Sound familiar? Well, Paul tried to stop that infringer, and like so many other inventors, he ended up with the infringer using PTab against him. Paul, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us what happened to you?
I'm a strong believer in the 7th Amendment, which gives us the right to a jury trial. And, you know, for any dispute over $25 is what the deal is. I had my patent filed back in 2002, had the idea circa 2000. The patent issued in 2006. At that time, I didn't know anything about the PTab because there was no such thing as the PTab. It didn't come along until 2011. I believe it's an ex post facto law, which can retroactively kill my patent issued in 2006, filed in 2002. So it was we asserted against Duke Energy in Delaware, and Duke is indemnified. Duke makes electrical power meters, uses electrical power meters. Itron makes electrical power meters and sells them to Duke. Once they infringed my patent in about 2012, 2013, they were able to increase their market share dramatically. They had a big contract with Duke. And if you know anything about Duke Energy, they're on the East Coast. They're one of the largest electrical utility in the US. So once Itron infringed, they got a huge chunk of the market because they're transmitting over the external power line IP consumption information, power consumption information in IP format, I should say. So they, about a year later, Itron petitioned the PTab and stayed our case in Delaware. Prior to that, Duke had moved to have it dismissed because it was an abstract idea. Judge Sue Robinson in Delaware didn't buy that and denied that motion. And so it was going to go to a jury trial. Of course, the PTab came in and stopped that. Itron petitioned and challenged a handful of claims from the independent claim that I was asserting. And they ended up getting them all invalidated based on obviousness. So I had teamed with an investor to help with the costs, and the investor decided to appeal to the federal circuit. So we did that, and in 2018 we appealed, and in 2019 the federal circuit did a Rule 36 to just agree with PTab, rubber stamp. So it's really,
Paul, let me say something real quick to the people watching.
Sure.
So if you lose at the PTab and you appeal it, it goes to the CAFC, that's the Court of Appeals of the Federal Circuit. And very often they do what Paul just described, a Rule 36. That's where they say, well, we agree with the other decision, and that's all. They don't even tell you why. You don't even know if they really looked at your case. It's a terrible injustice.
Yeah, I agree, Randy. And the federal circuit, they agree with the PTab about 50% of the time. A higher percentage, the smaller the person who's appealing, you know, the entity that's appealing. And so you only got about a 25% chance of getting any help from the federal circuit. So add that to the 84% kill rate at PTab, and if you're not, you know, you don't have deep pockets to start with, you're pretty much dead in the water, which is about where I am right now. So I took my family to the federal circuit oral hearing, and I figured, you know, I got 4 kids. My wife and I sat there and listened to Judge Wallach, Judge Raina, and Hughes. And I thought that, you know, they should be interested in that because it's going to affect them longer than it will me. And so anyway, they killed it based on obviousness. And obviousness is really a technical decision. It's not a legal decision. You have to understand the state of the art, and you have to imagine what a person of ordinary skill in the art or prosita would think, and then decide if you have that inventive step that goes beyond that. And I found that the APJs were, I can't believe that they were as incompetent as you'd have to be to believe some of the stuff that they believed. So my conclusion is that they were biased. Got a short video and it's about 10 minutes long, but I won't bore you with that. Basically, they used one piece of prior art. They brought to the PTab 3 pieces. PTab cut it down to 1, and it was a abandoned patent application that was translated from Korean to English, and it had one run-on sentence in that translation that implied that power was being transmitted over an external power line, which is the exact language that was added to get around some prior art that the examiner had brought. So they ignored that, and they went ahead and looked at that, but there's a requirement for prior art to be enabled, and it was not enabled. So they had to have their story such that because the prior art taught how to do internet protocol over a telephone line, then that somehow taught a posita how to do it over a power line. That's like saying that a telegraph makes a telephone obvious. That's like saying that you can transmit power over a telephone line. These things can't happen. So it's just an egregious series of, you know, the PTab judges finding the petitioner and their expert witness persuasive and rejecting all the arguments that we brought. So that's about it.
That's helpful. So let me give you a multiple choice question. Are these PTab decisions, so they invalidated your patent and the patents of 4,000 other inventors. Is it A, on the legal merits? Is it B, on the technical merits? Or is it C, on word games?
I say it's probably a combination of B and C, technical merits and word games. They play a lot of word games in their final written decision, but if they believe it themselves, then they must be technically incompetent. That's my conclusion. My language says transmission in IP format over an external power line network. The prior art doesn't even use IP over a power line. It uses something called DDTOT, Developed Data Transmission Overlay Technology. What is that? I couldn't find out what it was. I got a Google whack, and that's basically the prior art itself was the only returned result from Google. No one knows what that is. Their expert witness testified what it was, but it doesn't make it IP. That's what I use. But somehow a telephone line using a public switch telephone network, if anyone knows what that is, it creates a dedicated but temporary connection, physical connection from one point to another, like the operators used to do, but it's automatic. So once the PSTN came about, you were able to use the telephone line to make an IP network connection, but not before that. There's no PSTN in a power line. It's a multi-point to multi-point, whereas a telephone becomes a point-to-point. And that's all that the prior art talked about. So admittedly, IP networking is a niche field, but I have to conclude that the PTab judges were just biased.
Well, the other thing is, Paul, had you been in a real court with a jury and a real judge and a lot of due process and experts arguing all the merits, you probably would have won. Do you think?
I agree, Randy. I think if I could get a jury trial, and I'm keeping my eye very closely on Western District of Texas. If I could get a jury trial, I think it would have been a much different outcome.
Well, I think the stories are so true with everyone. How are our patents safe these days? Well, let's bring this to our debate now. The hopes and dreams of inventors were rekindled this week when the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case United States versus Arthrex Inc. Now, the case is the latest of many challenges to the constitutionality of the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, selected in violation of the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, as they weren't confirmed by the US Senate as required. Now, many inventors have raised concerns about the qualifications and biases of these 260 APJs, many of whom were selected while the former head of patents for Google was leading the USPO. The chief APJ at the time quipped that it was their job to be a death squad for patents. So I'd like to open up the discussion with Josh. Do you think the Supreme Court will invalidate the PTab?
Well, they should. We've been, there's several problems, very fundamental problems about the PTab. Congress, despite working on this for almost 2 decades, really screwed it up. And so you have many challenges to the structure of the PTab that have come about. And, we were surprised and disappointed in 2018 when the Supreme Court said that it's not a problem to mix the separation of powers. You have a judicial branch and an executive branch. Well, the PTab is usurping the judicial branch, and the Supreme Court didn't agree that time. And then again, the 7th Amendment issue that Paul raised was raised in 2018, and the Supreme Court said, nope, inventors don't get a right to a trial by jury. And so fundamentally, the idea of an administrative tribunal deciding invalidating property rights is a huge problem. And so the current problem that the Supreme Court just this Monday or Tuesday, 2 days ago, they granted certiorari in Arthrex. And so this is a case that says, wait a minute, if these are judges, so right now we're having confirmation hearings, right, for a new Supreme Court justice. Well, all the judges in the federal courts have to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Guess what? The PTab went a different route. So most of the PTab judges were hired by the former head of patents for Google, Michelle Lee, when she was running the patent office. And so now there's, they shuttled in about 150 of these people. We know very little about them. We do know they didn't go through Senate confirmation. We do know there's challenges with their technical competency. There's questions about their legal backgrounds, as well as their biases and conflicts. And so this seems like a very straightforward case. If you're going to be a judge and you're going to make a decision, and thousands of decisions, and there's no one that you're accountable to, then under the Constitution, you are an officer of the United States. And I think here's the thing. I'll take the pessimistic position and hope that I'm wrong. I think that we've got 3 or 4 votes on the Supreme Court that will have a big problem with the way the PTab is structured. History says they find a way to make an excuse for the PTab and for patent invalidations. So I'm going to go with history on this one and say, I think we're going to lose by a vote or 2.
Randy, I can see you want to say something.
What the Arthrex decision was, and from the appeals court, was that all the PTab judges were appointed unconstitutionally. But the way to remedy that was to make it so they could be fired for cause. And if they can be fired, then they're not superior officers, and therefore they don't have to be, confirmed by the Senate, right? Of course, and that is an unconstitutional solution, according to a lot of attorneys, which is why now the Supreme Court is taking this thing up. But
no, that's the second question, Randy. They accepted 2 questions. The first question is it a violation of the Appointments Clause? And the second question is it, can you fix it? Or do you have to roll back the entire American Invents Act? That's the second question.
I'm pretty optimistic about things, but having been in this fight for as many years as I have, there are so many things that go on behind the scenes and so many odd viewpoints. We know we have some allies, one particular ally on the Supreme Court, who's a real strong ally. If the other Supreme Court justices would read his dissents, they might end up being an ally one day. I don't know if they have to or not. But the real question is, what if they do rule that it's unconstitutional? Josh, would it have some kind of a retroactive effect on all these cases that where patents have already been invalidated?
There's several doctrines that they will try to apply to not say open up Pandora's box, but this is where representation is another problem. Thousands of inventors have lost their patents and their attorneys never objected, and if you don't object, then you waive the right. And so that's what they're going to say for most of these cases in the past. They're going to say, well, if you thought they were unconstitutional, you should have said so.
As a layperson, it blows me away. It's kind of like, okay, so if you didn't, when you objected, you needed to object to your PTab invalidation as being unconstitutional because the judges were, appointed unconstitutionally. If you didn't object, then sorry, you don't get to bring it up now. It kills me.
Well, that's because you think that the system is designed to promote innovation and to help small businesses and inventors, but it's absolutely who can finagle the most out of the system for their benefit. And inventors have not had good attorneys, have not had good advocacy. And we've allowed these large corporations to dominate. They dominate, they go and they write, they're actually teaching in the universities and the law schools and writing academic position papers and then amicus briefs. And then they're lobbying to get their judges appointed to the bench, and they're doing all those things. And so it's US Inventors, kind of the first time that inventors have had advocates. And we're one of the reasons this case is at the Supreme Court. We've been raising this issue for over 2 years now in letters to the president, in amicus briefs, and in specific cases. This is something that, if you, Paul, I know you've seen this, and Mike and Stu, you alluded to this as well. This is not the sort of thing that you can be passive about as an inventor. You've got to learn. You've got to come to US Inventor for help. As soon as you get trapped in one of these situations, you've got to seek expert help. And it doesn't come from the attorneys. The good attorneys wouldn't take your case. So
yeah. Well, the other thing too is you actually found me, Josh. I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't realize my case was actually gaining outside attention. And to be honest with you, my attorney had no idea. And even to try to find litigation funding, that's very, very difficult to find people to support you and help you. I'm learning now, matter of fact, through some of the cases that I'm dealing with now and the people that I have out of Texas that are helping me, I actually found a path to some of this resolution. But it was so difficult to find this. And what I mean by that is I've been searching for almost 3 years to find a litigation funder. That's insane. It's persistent, and my family kept telling me, he said, Mike, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. And I'm like, that's the worst thing to tell me because I'm going to figure it out, but it's, I just want to say thank you for helping me and thank US Inventor because, I walked the halls with Randy in Washington to make people aware. I didn't know you could even do that stuff. I'm just a small guy in Western New York with a town population of maybe, 15,000 people. Some of the greatest inventions come from those small areas and they don't know how to defend themselves when you got a big company like Google and Apple destroying you.
Michael, that's a good point. And I just want our audience to know that we're bringing you a lot of bad news. It is very bleak if you listen to the truth and you're educated about this. But we can make a huge difference. I mean, inventors have incredible credentials. You went through the patent process and you own a patent, and most of you have started multiple businesses. You're serial entrepreneurs. We can move the needle on this, and Michael's showing up, making the arguments in court and showing up to Congress. A few hundred more people doing that, and we're going to turn the corner here. What do you think, Randy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have now gotten to a point where we're being listened to a degree, right? We're not totally shut out as we were years ago. And we're moving the needle, and they're listening. Some are. And the thing about our fight too, just so everybody knows, it's both sides of the political aisle, right and left, who have done us in the past. And we have allies on both sides of the aisle for different reasons. But nevertheless, we have a lot of allies on the left and on the right. Usually it's the more hardcore right and the more hardcore left. It's kind of interesting. I'll tell you about it sometime. But the point is, we have a lot of allies, and it's an American issue that really transcends politics. It really does. Like, for instance, on the left, the argument is it's not okay that the big corporation can just crush the little guy. Well, that's a good argument. It's a great argument, and it's true. And it's American. And so on the right, there are more things like Constitution and property rights and all of that. So we have a fight underway, and we're gaining attention. In fact, look, US Inventor is being referenced in a lot of legal articles lately where we weren't mentioned before because we're actually doing a lot, like right now with this Arthrex case. So our solution, so an amicus brief, for any of you guys that don't know what that is, that's where if a court like the Supreme Court is about to look at a case, an amicus brief is an official legal brief that has the purpose of educating the justices on the issues, so they hopefully make the right decision. And what we're suggesting is that to solve the unconstitutional judge issue at the PTab, one possible solution is that they make the PTab decisions not binding, period. So for a binding decision, you have to go through a real court. That would change a lot for us. That would change a lot. And people have seen that and are saying, wow, that's an interesting idea. And no one else thought of it. And I didn't think of it. I don't know if, Josh, it was you or your attorney or a combination, but it's like other people involved, whatever. But the point is, we have some serious, very high-powered allies who care about inventors, who care about American innovation and patent rights, and they are part of this movement. And but what we need more of is inventors and just people who care about America, small business owners who don't necessarily have a patent, and maybe never thought of themselves as an inventor, but hate the fact that multinational corporations are using the political system to overcome and to beat them unfairly. Come on, this is an American fight, and we need a lot of people in it for us to really win it.
Thank you, Randy. I think I just want to give Paul a quick word. I can see him raise his hand now. Paul, if you could just add something quickly here for us.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. Just a couple things. I wanted to mention that since the APJs were not reviewed by the Senate, their background is a complete mystery. And yet you have this rule, a standard operating procedure at PTab that allows anyone who knows of an APJ's background to request an expanded panel. Patent holders don't have this information. Most of these APJs come from big legal firms. It's a club, and they know each other. And so that's an asymmetrical advantage for the petitioner. I'm curious if I wanted to ask, about Barrett, if she becomes appointed, if she would participate. I think that might help if she would, but it may be too late, it may not happen. Also, if you raise the issue to the PTab about the unconstitutional appointed APJs, the APJs don't have the power to change that. So why would you even raise such a thing? Or you'd save that for the Federal Circuit, which is where it was shot down previously. And then finally they took it with Arthrex. So I think unconstitutionally appointed judges make unconstitutional decisions. So I call a do-over on that. Do it with a constitutionally appointed judge. The only way it's going to help us is if the Supreme Court both agrees with the first point from the federal circuit that they were unconstitutionally appointed, but changes the remedy to throw out all the decisions and call it do-over.
One quick question I just want to add. Don't be scared to go to US Inventor and ask a question. You know, US Inventor found me and was able to get briefs written and things like that to put me in connect with the right people. I just want to tell the attendees, because it looks like we have some here, if you have a question, ask these guys. It might mean minuscule, or you might think it's not important at all. It's amazing how they were helpful to get me the resources that I was looking for.
Thank you. And just a quick, I can see Stu wants to add a quick comment. Last comment from Stu.
Yeah, just quickly, I want to mention that I was invited last January to DC to meet with Pete Navarro and his staff. And I was obviously to review infringement, and especially international. And I was surprised to see that they were very naive about PTab, really didn't have much information about it. And again, they pushed hard about, rather than doing, you know, a hit for infringement, just focus on trade secret theft. So again, I want to underline that, because the feds, that's what they consider the issue. They're not really too focused on infringement.
Stu,
Nobody
you really
seems to care about the PTab.
Hey, Stu, you really mean trademark theft, right?
No, I mean trade secret theft, which happens when, with me, with Lowe's, when we did the negotiations, after you sign all your non-disclosures and all the appropriate paperwork, then of course they want to see your files. They want to understand, because the patent doesn't necessarily give you all the juice you need, say, to make, you know, the type of tools that we have. So you're introducing different types of alloys, your different types of components, whatnot. You really, you know, this is something you can manufacture. So that's considered a trade secret. So for whatever reason, when I met with, that was halted, of course, by COVID. We're going to be picking this up again after the election. But they really are pushing hard, you know, to consider it a trade secret theft, because they can get behind that, number one. And number two, the FBI actually now has a task force that's in place nationwide, all these different, there's even one right near me here in Roseville, California. And that's their focus. They will not talk about infringement, but if you bring up the trade secret theft, they're all over it, and they will actually join.
As long as, can we file a trade secret case against the patent office for stealing all our trade secrets and giving us phony patents?
Definitely.
Well, I think that's a good point for me to thank everyone today, Mike, Stu, Paul, Josh, and Randy, and to everyone who signed in to watch. And of course, a big thank you to US Inventor for all the work that you continue to do. And just to let everyone know, every inventor out there, you're not alone. And I'm going to give the final words to Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to everybody who participated here, but also everybody watching. Realize we are moving the needle, but we have a long way to go. And the thing we need most is to get the word out, to make people aware of the issue, and to grow our ranks. And what we need everybody to do is go to our website and sign our Inventor Rights resolution. It's at usinventor.org. And that's how you join US Inventor. Simply sign the resolution. We then need to do, and we'll let you know, you'll be on our email list, so you'll hear what we're up to from time to time. But the other thing is, we will be approaching US representatives and senators and trying to get them to see this issue. And what matters to them most is if their constituents tell them it's an important issue. So we need you to sign our resolution and become active in this effort to inform them, and even try to get meetings set up with them. And if you do, we'll help you get other inventors from your district to that meeting, and either maybe Josh or I will show up as well. So, and we'll coach you as well if we can't make it, or if we can. But work with us, and let's be part of this movement, because this is so important to America.